The first shot cracked through the snow-covered canyon like a whip, sharp and sudden, and Anna's heart slammed against her ribs as she threw herself behind a fallen pine. The cold bit at her cheeks, freezing her tears before they could fall, and her hands clutched the small frame of Mateo, who trembled against her side. The boy's wide brown eyes were round with fear, reflecting the fading light of a winter afternoon that threatened to vanish into darkness any moment. Snowflakes fell thick around them, covering footprints and masking the world, yet Anna knew the danger was far from hidden. Somewhere beyond the ridge and the blizzard, someone was hunting them. She pressed Mateo closer. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own voice betrayed her uncertainty. The boy's small body shuddered in response, and she could feel the tremor of his fear seeping into her own muscles. She had taken him in months ago, finding him abandoned on the edge of the prairie, a boy who seemed older than his 10 years, carrying the grief of someone who had seen too much of the world's cruelty. In those months, she had taught him how to light a fire in wet wood, how to track small game, how to survive where winter could kill in a single night. And yet, nothing had prepared her for the figure now cutting a dark silhouette against the ridge. He was tall and imposing, moving with the surety of someone who belonged to the land, yet with the grace of a predator. His coat, long and dark, brushed the snow as he descended, beads and feathers glinting faintly in the weak sun. Long black hair fell in waves around his shoulders, framing a face both noble and hardened by hardship. There was a calm about him, an inner certainty that made Anna's pulse quicken. She didn't recognize him at first, only that the air seemed to shift when he moved, as though the canyon itself bent to his will. "Mateo," he called, voice deep and steady, carrying through the storm of snow like it belonged to the wind itself. The boy froze, lips parting. "Papa?" Anna's heart lurched. Mateo had spoken of a father he barely remembered, a man ripped from his life during a raid that had left only shadows and sorrow behind. She had been his mother in every sense that mattered, feeding him, soothing his nightmares, keeping him alive, but she had never imagined the real man would come searching, piercing the winter landscape like a ghost from a past she had never known. "I won't let him take you," she whispered fiercely, though the words sounded hollow even to her. The man on the ridge didn't move aggressively. Instead, he stopped, dropping to one knee, the snow swirling around him like spirits dancing. There was no anger in his eyes, only a depth of longing and the quiet ache of a father's heart. "He is my son," he said, voice low but unwavering. "I have searched for him for 10 winters, 10 summers. And now, at last." His tone broke slightly, but his posture remained strong, unyielding, rooted in the earth like the mountains themselves. Anna's mind spun. She wanted to run, to shield the boy, to deny this man the child she had fought to protect. But there was no malice in his words, no claim to power beyond what the boy already recognized. Mateo's gaze shifted between them, unsure, trembling, yet curious, drawn to something that Anna couldn't touch with her fear. "I didn't know where he was," she said finally, her voice raw. "I found him alone and scared. I couldn't leave him." He nodded, the corners of his eyes crinkling with understanding. "And you kept him alive. For that I am grateful." Anna's shoulders sagged with exhaustion she hadn't realized she carried. Gratitude was a strange thing, so foreign to her daily struggle, and yet it warmed the frost-bitten edges of her heart. She had lived her life in isolation, in constant battle with a world that offered little kindness. And yet here was someone whose very presence demanded recognition, whose claim was not of property but of love and devotion. The canyon around them seemed to hold its breath, the snow falling in silence except for the distant echo of hooves. Anna's pulse leapt. More were coming, perhaps bounty hunters or outlaws drawn by rumors of a boy alone in the winter wastes. The man Tahar. as she would soon learn, stood, his movements deliberate, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We need to move," he said, voice calm but firm. "Tonight." Anna nodded, gathering Mateo close and bracing herself against the wind that threatened to knock them off balance. She stole one more glance at Tahar. He was a figure shaped by the wilderness itself, long hair catching the snow, tribal jewelry glinting faintly as he crouched beside them. He carried an authority that demanded no obedience, yet inspired trust. She didn't know him, and yet something inside whispered that she could. They began the trek across the icy canyon, every step measured and careful. Snow crunched beneath their boots, icy boulders jutted from the frozen earth like jagged teeth, and the wind screamed through the cliffs, carrying the scent of pine, cold, and distant danger. Anna kept Mateo's small hand in hers, feeling the pulse of fear and courage intermingled in the boy. Tahar moved slightly ahead, covering their path with eyes and instincts that had been sharpened by years of hunting and survival. The hours passed slowly, the canyon a maze of whiteness that threatened to swallow them whole. Anna's muscles ached, and the cold seeped into her bones, but she pressed on, driven by a mix of maternal instinct and growing curiosity about the man who had walked into her life like a storm. Tahar rarely spoke, but when he did, it was to guide her safely over a ledge or worn of thin ice, each word deliberate and measured. Carrying the authority of someone who knew the land, and the stakes died as twilight fell. The shadows lengthened and the cold intensified. They found a small overhang, a natural shelter from the wind where they could rest for the night. Anna built a small fire from dry branches she had scavenged, while Tahar gathered stones to form a protective ring. Mateo huddled against her side, shivering, and she pulled him close, letting her own warmth seep into his trembling frame. "You've done well," Tahar said quietly, not as a command but as an observation. "He is safe because of you." Anna looked at him, eyes wide. I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "You've found him, yes. But he is mine too, in every way that matters." Tahar's gaze softened, the edges of his sternness melting in the firelight. "And I see that. You have given him life when I could only search for it. I do not take that from you. If you allow, perhaps we could share this burden together." Anna swallowed hard, caught off guard by the vulnerability in his voice. She had spent years alone, guarding her heart and her boy, and yet here was a man who offered partnership without demanding surrender. She wanted to push him away, to hold tightly to the life she had carved out in the snow and silence. And yet, something in the way he looked at her, steady and unflinching, planted a seed of hope she had not realized she craved. The night stretched on. Mateo slept, exhausted from fear and exertion, and Anna watched the boy's chest rise and fall. Tahar sat across from her, his dark eyes glinting in the firelight, sharp and alert, yet undeniably human in their depth. The cave, small and rough, became a sanctuary, a fragile refuge from the world beyond the canyon dot in the flickering warmth of the fire. They spoke in halting bursts, Anna telling of months spent raising Mateo, teaching him to survive in a world that could be merciless, and Tahar recounting years spent tracking rumors, piecing together fragments of his son's life across deserts, towns, and mountains. With each word, a bond formed, unspoken but tangible, binding the woman who had become a mother to the man, who had never stopped being a father. By the time the first pale light of dawn touched the snowy canyon, Anna realized something she had not allowed herself to admit. Tahar was no longer just a stranger. He was part of the fragile circle she had built around Mateo, part of the warmth she allowed herself to feel despite the cold, the fear, and the harshness of the land. And in turn, she was part of his search, his journey, his redemption. The snow continued to fall, softening the edges of the canyon, masking footprints, and quieting the dangers that might have tracked them overnight. Yet beneath the snow and the ice, something new was growing: a cautious trust, a fragile understanding, and the first flicker of a connection that could survive even the harshest winters. Anna, watching Tahar check the ridgeline before they set off, felt a tremor of hope in her chest. This journey would not be easy, and the canyon held more perils than snow and ice. But perhaps, for the first time in years, she felt that survival might mean more than endurance. It could mean family. And maybe, just maybe, it could mean love. The cave was small, carved naturally into the side of a jagged cliff, yet it offered a fragile shield from the winter wind that howled through the canyon. Anna worked silently, tending a fire she had managed to spark from the dry kindling she had scavenged from the surrounding cliffs. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows across the rough walls, and the warmth, though small, seeped into her bones, offering a brief comfort against the bitter cold. Mateo had curled into a small ball beside her, the fur-lined blanket she had wrapped around him doing little to quiet his shivers. His small body still carried the tremors of the morning's terror, and Anna could feel every heartbeat, every quiver. As if the boy were an extension of herself, Tahar sat across from them, legs crossed and a knife in his hands, sharpening it with meticulous care. The sound of stone against steel rang soft and steady, punctuating the otherwise quiet cave. He didn't speak, but Anna could feel the weight of his presence, the kind of presence that seemed to hold the world in check. She had never seen a man so calm in the face of danger, so deliberate in every motion, and yet she sensed an undercurrent of exhaustion, a toll taken by years of searching for the son who now lay asleep beside her. Anna's gaze flicked toward him. "Why did you wait so long?" she asked finally, the words breaking the tense silence. Her voice was soft but edged with frustration and curiosity. It wasn't an accusation exactly, but it carried all the weight of a woman who had raised a child alone, who had fought to survive through months of isolation and hardship, only to have a stranger appear claiming him. Tahar's dark eyes met hers, glinting in the firelight. He didn't answer immediately, letting the flames reflect across his sharp features. "I had to be certain," he said at last. "I had to follow the trails carefully, hear the whispers of the land, track every rumor. If I had come too soon, I could have failed him. I could have lost him again." Anna's chest tightened. "You lost him. For 10 years, he didn't know you. Her voice faltered, and she turned away for a moment, focusing on arranging small stones around the fire to keep it from collapsing. "I became his mother. I had no choice but to protect him." Tahar's expression softened, his knife momentarily forgotten. "And you did," he said quietly, almost reverently. "You kept him alive, nurtured him, guided him. For that, I will never forget you." The warmth of the fire flickered against her cheeks, but it couldn't melt the ice that had accumulated in her chest over years of solitude. Gratitude, she realized, was a strange and dangerous thing. It disarmed her in ways she wasn't ready to be. She had survived alone for so long, had grown to trust only the land and the boy who depended on her. Yet here was a man who did not demand, did not accuse, did not seek to claim. He simply observed, acknowledged, and, in some way, offered partnership without expectation. Mateo stirred, murmuring in his sleep. Anna reached down and tucked the blanket around him more tightly. "He dreams of you," she said softly, almost to herself. "I think? Maybe he's always wanted you to be here." Tahar nodded, his gaze dropping to the boy with a tenderness Anna had not expected. "I was afraid he would not remember me or that he would reject me. But he has survived. And that is because of you." Anna's throat tightened. She had spent so long defining herself as the protector, the sole guardian of a boy who had come from a world she had no claim to. And now, faced with a man who had never stopped searching for him, she realized her own heart had been searching too for understanding, for someone who could stand beside her in the harshness of the world, for love. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted, voice small. "You've found him, yes. But he is mine too. I've been his mother in every way that counts. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared into the fire, uncertain how to finish the confession. Tahar leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The shadows of his face softened in the firelight. "I do not seek to take that from you," he said gently. "I only wish to share it. If you will let me, perhaps we can care for him together, protect him together. And in time, share more than that." Anna's eyes widened. Her heart thundered in her chest, a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief. She had spent years surviving alone, defending a fragile life against the cruelty of the world. And now here was a man offering partnership, respect, and dreadfully, intoxicatingly something more. The cave seemed to grow smaller, cozier, as if the walls themselves had drawn close to contain the warmth of the fire and the fragile tension between them. Outside, the wind howled against the rock, but inside, they sat in silence. The only sound the crackle of flames and the occasional pop of frozen sap in the kindling. Hours passed. Anna spoke of the months she had spent raising Mateo, teaching him to read tracks in the snow, to catch small fish in freezing streams, to survive when the world offered little more than hardship. Tahar shared stories of the long desert trails he had traveled, of towns he had scoured, of rumors he had chased across mountains and plains, all in search of a boy who might no longer exist. Their voices intertwined with the firelight, weaving a tapestry of shared care, fear, and resilience. As the night deepened, the fire dwindled to glowing embers. Mateo slept peacefully, exhausted from the emotional and physical strain of the day. Anna watched his chest rise and fall, her hand brushing his hair. She felt a strange sense of calm, a rare moment where the chaos of the past, the dangers they had faced, and the uncertainty of the future seemed to pause, allowing a fragile bubble of peace. Tahar stood, stretching his shoulders, and walked over to the entrance of the cave. He peered into the darkness, snow swirling around him, and for a long moment Anna watched him in silence. He was every bit the hunter, the warrior, and yet the father, the man who had waited 10 years for this reunion. There was a vulnerability in him that the fire could not touch, a depth she wanted to understand, to reach, to be part of. When he returned, he sat beside her, close enough that their knees brushed. "You have done more than you know," he said softly. "For him, for me. For yourself. You have survived where many would have faltered, and yet you have allowed yourself to care, to love." Anna shook her head, a small laugh escaping despite the weight of emotion. "I didn't think I could ever. Not survive, but actually feel. I've been so careful, so guarded. And now—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish, unsure how to name the strange flutter in her chest when he looked at her like that. He reached out, a rough, calloused hand brushing hers. The gesture was tender, deliberate, full of an unspoken promise. "We will learn together," he said. "We will face the world together. And perhaps, one day, we can face more than survival. Perhaps we can face life truly." Anna's heart stuttered. She had spent so long alone that the very thought of partnership, of sharing her life with another, seemed impossible. And yet, here was a man who had endured a decade of searching, who had faced deserts, snow, and storms for his son, offering her a place at his side. She felt the warmth of the fire, the faint warmth of the boy asleep between them, and the strange, new warmth that spread through her chest. By the time the first hints of dawn crept into the canyon, Painting the snow in soft pink and gold, Anna realized that the night had shifted something deep inside her. She no longer felt like a solitary guardian fighting an endless winter. She felt like a part of something larger, a small, fragile family born from survival, trust, and shared devotion. Mateo stirred and blinked awake, rubbing his eyes. He looked between Anna and Tahar, then reached for both of their hands, tugging them together in a silent plea that made Anna's eyes sting with tears she did not try to hide. Tahar smiled down at the boy, brushing a strand of snow-damp hair from his forehead. "We will be all we need," he whispered, as if speaking to the boy, to her, and to himself. Anna nodded, gripping his hand. The canyon outside remained harsh, unyielding, and dangerous. But inside the firelight of their cave, a new path had begun to form, one that did not require them to face it alone. Here, in the warmth of shared stories, whispered confessions, and silent understanding, they had begun to become more than a protector, a son, and a father. They had begun to become a family, and as the snow continued to fall beyond the mouth of the cave, blanketing the canyon in white, Anna allowed herself, for the first time in years, to hope that the storms of the past had not only led her to survival, but had also led her here. To Tahar, to Mateo, and perhaps to something more beautiful than survival love. The morning air bit at Anna's face as she and Tahar led Mateo along the narrow ridge. Snowdrifts clung to jagged rocks, and every step threatened to slide them closer to the canyon's jagged edges. The storm from the previous night had left a treacherous white blanket over the landscape, turning familiar terrain into an unpredictable maze. Mateo trudged between them, small legs struggling, cheeks red from the cold. But his eyes held a quiet excitement, as though he sensed the danger yet relished the thrill of survival. "You need to watch every step," Tahar said, his voice calm and steady despite the wind that tore at their coats. His eyes scanned the ridge with precision, noticing every patch of ice, every loose stone. "The snow hides the earth beneath. One misstep and—" His voice trailed off, but the warning was clear. Anna tightened her grip on Mateo's hand. "I've got him," she said firmly, though she couldn't deny the tremor in her own voice. Each step was an exercise in trust in the boy's small endurance. Trust in Tahar's skill and trust in herself, which had been hard-won over months of solitary survival. The ridge narrowed further, and the wind screamed through the canyon, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and the sharp tang of frost. Anna's boots scraped against ice-hidden rocks, and she felt her muscles strain with the effort of keeping balance while shielding Mateo. Tahar moved ahead like a shadow, long black hair whipping around his face, beads and feathers catching the pale sunlight, giving him an almost spectral presence. Despite the danger, Anna couldn't help but notice the quiet power he carried, a combination of physical strength, skill, and an aura of unshakable resolve. Suddenly, a crack echoed through the canyon, sharp and unexpected. Anna froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Mateo clutched her coat, wide-eyed. "Stay low," Tahar commanded, crouching behind a rock and scanning the slope below. Through the flurries, shadows moved figures, hunched and hurried, carrying rifles that gleamed briefly in the sunlight. Bandits, bounty hunters. Or worse. Whoever they were, they had found the trail that Tahar had followed so carefully. Anna's breath came in short, sharp bursts. "We can't outrun them on this ridge," she whispered, mostly to herself. But Tahar had already anticipated her fear. "Then we fight," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His movements were fluid and precise, a man who had been raised to survive every threat the land could throw at him. He positioned himself to cover the narrow approach to the ridge, and Anna followed instinctively, using the rocks for cover and keeping Mateo pressed close against her side. The first shots rang out. ricocheting off rocks, splintering ice. Anna's ears rang from the sudden violence, and her stomach clenched in fear. Yet Tahar remained calm, his every motion calculated. He returned fire, and each shot found its mark, sending the attackers scrambling for cover. Mateo whimpered and ducked lower, but Anna could see the admiration in his eyes as he watched Tahar, this man, the father who had searched for him through deserts and storms, protect them with fierce determination. A bandit slipped, sliding on the icy slope, and Anna felt a surge of relief as Tahar's sharp aim ended the threat before it could reach them. Another tried to flank from higher ground, but Tahar anticipated the movement, striking with both rifle and skillful hand-to-hand maneuvers that left the attackers disoriented and retreating. When the last figure fled into the snow, the canyon fell silent except for the wind and the crackle of the dying fire that Anna had kept in a small pit. She leaned heavily on her knees, chest heaving. Mateo clung to her, trembling but alive. Tahar wiped the sweat and snow from his brow, then crouched beside them. "You're both safe," he said softly, voice low and steady, almost a vow. "For now. But we cannot linger." Anna nodded, still catching her breath. I thought I could protect him, but..." She trailed off, overwhelmed by a rush of gratitude and fear. Tahar's presence had changed everything, had made her feel both vulnerable and protected at once. He reached out, brushing a snow-laden lock of hair from her face. "You have done more than survive," he said quietly. "You have given him life, strength, and safety. I could not have done what you have." And now, his eyes met hers, dark and unwavering, full of emotion that he did not voice in words but in the depth of his gaze. "Now we move forward, together." Anna's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had spent so long relying only on herself, so long shielding both Mateo and her own heart. And now, here was Tahar offering not only partnership in survival but something deeper, something unspoken that hung between them like the snow-laden branches overhead. They pressed on, descending cautiously from the ridge. Mateo walked between them, occasionally stumbling in the drifts, and Anna found herself catching him instinctively, her hands lingering a little longer than necessary, her glance meeting Tahar's briefly. In that shared look was recognition of danger, of trust, and quietly, of something unspoken that had begun to bloom between them. By midday, they found a small hollow with a partially frozen stream. Tahar knelt and tested the ice with a stick, assessing its strength. Anna helped Mateo remove his boots and dry his feet, carefully wrapping them in spare cloth to prevent frostbite. The boy chattered softly, asking questions about the rifle, about the snow, about the strange beads and feathers Tahar wore. Tahar answered with patience, his voice gentle, explaining each piece, each lesson, as though he were building a bridge not only to his son but to Anna as well. Anna watched them, a warmth spreading through her chest that had little to do with the meager sunlight. She realized she had been so focused on survival and fear that she had almost missed the beauty in connection, in trust, in family forming in the harshest of conditions. As they rested, Tahar shared more of his past, the years spent chasing rumors across deserts, the nights spent under stars with only the wind for company, and the relentless drive that had brought him to this snow-covered canyon. Anna listened, enraptured not only by the danger and adventure in his stories but by the tenderness he showed toward Mateo, the boy he had never stopped loving, the son who had survived because of her care. "You've done what I could not," Tahar said at one point, his voice low, almost a whisper, as they watched Mateo play with snow at the edge of the stream. "You've given him life, safety, and love. And for that, I will always be grateful." Anna's throat tightened. We've both done what we could," she said softly. I couldn't have kept him alive without knowing someone like you existed out there, searching for him. And you couldn't have found him without me. Tahar's gaze softened, and he reached out, brushing a strand of Anna's hair from her face. And now we will face the world together. Whatever comes, we face it as one. You, me, and Mateo. The snow continued to fall, a quiet curtain around them, muffling the world beyond. The danger was far from over. There would be more bandits, more threats, more winters, but for the first time, Anna felt the unshakable sense of a bond forming that went beyond survival. She looked at Tahar, really looked at him, and saw not only the warrior and the father, but the man who could stand beside her. Through any storm, Mateo came running back to them, cheeks flushed and laughter echoing softly in the hollow. "Papa, look what I found," he cried, holding up a small icicle shaped like a jagged sword. Tahar laughed, a deep, rich sound, and Anna's heart swelled at the sight of the boy's joy. At the sight of Tahar's gentle pride, they settled again by the stream, Anna wrapping Mateo in her arms, Tahar sitting close, the warmth between them defying the chill of the winter canyon. There were no promises of ease, no illusions of a simple path ahead, but there was trust and there was connection. And sometimes that was enough. As the afternoon waned, the canyon shadows grew long and ominous. Anna shivered, more from anticipation than cold, and Tahar noticed. He placed a hand over hers, steady and reassuring. "We will rest here tonight," he said. "Then we continue before sunrise. We must reach safer ground before the bandits regroup." Anna nodded, leaning slightly against him, letting the comfort of his presence calm the storm in her chest. Mateo drifted into sleep once more, lulled by the rhythmic sound of the stream and the rare feeling of safety. And as night fell over the snow-covered canyon, Anna allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she had been avoiding. Tahar was no longer just a stranger, no longer just the boy's father. He was becoming her anchor, her partner, and perhaps, if fate allowed, something far deeper than either of them had dared hope. The snow continued to swirl around them, a relentless reminder of the harsh world outside their fragile shelter. Yet within the circle of warmth, trust, and shared hearts, a new family had begun to form. Anna, Mateo, and Tahar, bound by love, survival, and the promise of facing every storm together, faced the long night ahead with a courage born not of solitude, but of unity. The first pale light of dawn glinted across the snow-covered cliffs as Anna, Mateo, and Tahar prepared to move. The canyon had been merciless during the night, the wind howling like a living thing, yet the trio had survived. Every shivering breath, every careful step across ice-hidden rocks had led them to this fragile moment of quiet before the storm of danger that still lurked in the world outside their small hollow. Tahar adjusted his long coat, the feathers and beads catching the faint sunlight as he scanned the ridge ahead. "We must move quickly," he said, his voice low but commanding. "The bandits may return, and they will be less cautious this time. They have seen we can survive their first assault." Anna nodded, pulling Mateo close. The boy clung to her, shivering but wide-eyed with both fatigue and anticipation. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "We'll make it." She met Tahar's gaze briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them of trust, of shared determination, of the fragile but unbreakable bond that had grown between them in the canyon's harsh winter. The path ahead was treacherous, a narrow pass called Dead Man's Pass, notorious for its icy slopes and hidden cliffs. Every step had to be deliberate, every move calculated. Anna led Mateo by the hand, careful to keep him balanced, while Tahar moved slightly ahead, scanning for any signs of threat. His presence was both comforting and commanding. She had never seen a man who could be so simultaneously protective and respectful, and it drew a strange, new warmth into her chest. Halfway through the pass, the faint crunch of snow alerted them. Anna froze, her heart hammering. Mateo pressed against her, small hands gripping her coat. Tahar's dark eyes narrowed, and he crouched instinctively behind a large boulder. Through the swirl of snow, figures emerged, bandits, drawn once more to the rumors of a boy alone in the wilderness, armed with nothing but desperation and greed. Anna swallowed hard. She had faced danger before, had raised Mateo through months of hardship and fear, but she had never faced it with Tahar by her side. Now, watching him move with lethal grace, she felt a strange mix of awe and desire, and a fierce determination to survive together. "Stay behind me," Tahar whispered, his voice a low promise. He fired the first shot, precise and deliberate, taking out a bandit before he could aim. Anna ducked instinctively, pulling Mateo close, and then returned fire with the old rifle she had scavenged months ago, the stock worn smooth by constant use. The snow around them erupted in chaos, echoing with the thunder of rifles and the sharp cracks of pistols. Mateo crouched low, watching his father, watching Anna, learning without being told. His fear was tempered by the awe of witnessing the bond between the adults. The way Tahar protected them both with skill and unwavering focus, and the way Anna fought with equal courage and desperation. By the time the last bandit fled, disappearing into the snow and rocks, the canyon fell silent once more. Anna's hands trembled, her heart racing, but she was alive. Mateo clung to her, and Tahar lowered his rifle, breathing heavily, his dark eyes scanning the terrain for any remaining threats. "You're safe," he said quietly, kneeling beside them. "For now." Anna let out a shaky breath. "We made it," she said, the weight of relief pressing against her chest. She looked at Tahar, really looked, and for the first time allowed herself to see the man beneath the warrior. Beneath the father, a man capable of tenderness, of understanding, of love. Mateo tugged at Tahar's hand, smiling through the lingering fear. "Papa," he said softly, "I want to keep going with you. With both of you." Tahar's face softened, a rare smile breaking across his features. He brushed the boy's hair from his forehead. "We will, Mateo, always." The family moved carefully down the final stretch of Dead Man's Pass, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows over the pristine snow. Each step was deliberate, but now the fear was tempered with something new: hope. They had survived storms, bandits, and the merciless winter, and each challenge had only strengthened the bond between them. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small wooded valley that promised relative safety from both the elements and prying eyes. A frozen creek ran through it, partially covered in ice, and Anna immediately began setting up a small shelter using fallen branches and snow-packed walls. Tahar assisted, his long hands steady and sure, and Mateo gathered kindling, his small laughter echoing through the trees as he worked out. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the snow in gold and crimson, they settled by a fire that Tahar helped Anna build. Mateo sat between them, sharing a small meal of dried meat and snow-melted water. There was a rare moment of peace, fragile but profound, where the world outside ceased to exist, leaving only the three of them in the warmth of firelight and the glow of newfound family. Anna watched Tahar as he tended the flames, his face illuminated in a soft golden light. She felt a pull in her chest, a desire she could no longer deny. "Tahar," she began, her voice trembling slightly, I've been so careful with my heart, so careful to survive alone. But now with you here—" He turned to her, eyes dark and unreadable yet full of understanding. "I feel it too," he said softly, stepping closer. "I've spent 10 years searching for Mateo, but these months with you, these days in the snow, I've realized something I cannot ignore. Anna's breath caught. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the honesty that matched the fire in his heart. Slowly, she reached out, brushing her fingers against his hand. The touch was electric, grounding, and the cold winter air seemed to vanish between them. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered. "I don't want to lose either of you." "You won't," Tahar said firmly, his voice low but unwavering. "We face the world together. You, me, Mateo. Nothing will take that from us." And then, as if the world itself had paused to witness their union, he leaned down, and their lips met in a gentle, deliberate kiss. It was a kiss that carried all the fear, hope, and unspoken longing of the months they had endured together. It was a promise, not only of love but of partnership, of trust, of family. Mateo's small hands gripped their sides, giggling softly at the closeness. And Anna laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. As Tahar pulled her into his arms, warmth against the cold, heart against heart, night fell fully, and they huddled together by the fire, the stars above casting a pale glow across the valley. Anna rested her head on Tahar's shoulder, Mateo asleep against her chest, and she felt a completeness she had never known. The winter storms, the bandits, the years of isolation, all of it had led to this moment, this fragile, unshakable bond between them. Tahar whispered into the night, "We have survived everything the world has thrown at us. Now we can build something new. Together." Anna closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the past lift just slightly. "Yes," she murmured. Together. The following days were spent securing their shelter, foraging, and moving cautiously toward the nearest settlement where they could rest and resupply. Every step was filled with small moments of connection, Tahar showing Mateo how to fish beneath a thin layer of ice, Anna teaching him to read the snow for signs of wildlife, and the three of them sharing quiet laughter over small victories. The boy thrived under their combined care, growing stronger and more confident, while Anna and Tahar's bond deepened, solidifying into a partnership that was both passionate and grounded in shared experience. By the time they reached a small, quiet town nestled at the edge of the snow-covered plains, they were no longer just survivor and searcher, they were a family. Tahar carried Mateo over a shallow creek, and Anna walked beside them, her hand brushing Tahar's occasionally, each touch a reminder of the love and trust that had grown in the harshest of winters. The townsfolk watched curiously as they arrived, snow-dusted and weary, but Anna and Tahar's presence commanded respect. No one questioned Mateo's place between them, for it was clear he belonged with both. Anna felt a warmth in her chest, not just from the fire of the hearth they would soon find, but from the unspoken acknowledgement that they had survived, triumphed, and found each other in a world that often seemed cruel. That night, in a small cabin they rented at the edge of town, Anna watched Tahar and Mateo asleep, their breathing slow and even. She felt a profound sense of peace. She had fought, she had feared, she had survived, and now she had something more precious than survival: love, family, and the certainty that they would face whatever the future held together. She allowed herself a small smile, brushing a hand across Mateo's hair and then across Tahar's shoulder. The storm had passed, the dangers behind them, and the promise of tomorrow stretched wide and open before them, filled with hope, laughter, and the warmth of a family forged in snow, struggle, and love. Outside, the snow fell silently, blanketing the world in white, and within the cabin, three hearts beat in quiet harmony, bound together by trust, courage, and the promise of enduring love. And for the first time in years, Anna felt that the wilderness, the hardship, and the long winters had not only been trials, they had been the crucible that forged them into something unbreakable, a family.